This is probably going to be the hardest one. This video is tied into the last two videos that I made, but it's also tied into a larger series that I was doing last year that I promised I would have a conclusion to. And this is Why Do I Believe in God? My life has been horrible and tragic. And I don't mean that hyperbolically. So when I was born, there was a hurricane. That's not a joke. And my mother was having a party and she was drinking. Yes, she was. And I was born preemie, super preemie. Like as in I wasn't done baking preemie. And they didn't think I was going to make it. I was in an incubator between 3 to 6 months. I don't remember the exact number right now. And I was born, and that was it, right? Everything went great. No. Right when I got out, my great-grandparents died. Right when I got out of the hospital. That was followed by my mother getting incredibly sick. She had gestational diabetes that then became real diabetes. And at first she managed it well. But after the birth and later, about a year later, the death of my sister, my mother no longer was managing her diabetes well. And the second time around, the gestational diabetes stayed. So she didn't get better, she got worse. And eventually she died. She died when I was about 6 years old. Also, my favorite aunt died at the same year. So that was kind of, that sucked. Yeah, that sucked. Then my favorite cousin committed self-deletion. So there's that. And, okay, bad start. But it's going to be fine. Yeah, you have a lot of friends. I have a girlfriend. Even though I'm getting a little bit bullied at school, I'm also beating up my bullies. I'm fighting back. So things look good. But then they decide to hold me back a year. And when they decide to hold me back a year, I then have to make all new friends. Okay, that's fine. And then my dad decides to move. So not only did I have to make all new friends, but then I had to make all new friends somewhere else. And I went from a Spanish-speaking poor neighborhood to a English-speaking, what at the time would be called a rich neighborhood. Now it's just middle class, but at the time for the location where I live, it was not middle class. This was, upscale. A lot of ranch land, a lot of farmland. I could go hunting and all that kind of stuff, and things were okay for the most part. I made friends quickly. I had to lose the accent very fast and never really got to latch onto Spanish. So, that ends up being a hindrance later on in life, but things are fine. I meet a girl, but people find out that my mom's dead, and I start getting picked on and bullied because people don't want to believe their parents can die. And the parents stupidly tell their kids that I was lying because parents don't die. So that led to a ton of bullying, and not kind, funny bullying. I got jumped so bad that my heart stopped, and I continued to get beat up for that. I was a skinny, effeminate, soft kid, and I didn't speak much, and I didn't get along very well. So I started wearing all black, which didn't help things. Then I got dandruff. That didn't help things. Still somehow had at least one girlfriend every year. I don't know how I managed that. But by the time that I got to junior high, I was a complete outcast. And I discovered alcohol. That wasn't good. I went to school drunk. I know this is all about why I believe God is true. Don't worry, we're getting there. I went to school drunk, got kicked out of school. I got into a fight because someone threatened my girlfriend. And I didn't have a lot of self-control back then, so I really beat the crap out of the person. Also, I went from being bullied to not being bullied, which that was fun. I had a summer, the girl who I had a crush on moved away. I was heartbroken, so I spent the entire summer weightlifting. When I got back, my arms were bigger than my head, and the kids that wanted to pick on me couldn't. I beat up 3 of my bullies back to back, and they never fought me again. Although, at one point, after I had learned my lesson about not fighting, they tried to get me to fight, and I refused to, so the entire football team spit on me, and that was not fun. That followed up with a round of expulsions and put me in for them, not for me. They didn't just mess with me, they messed with some other people as well. They were out of control. I didn't know that at the time. I just knew I was not happy. So I got in trouble, and I got kicked out of school for 6 months for fighting and some randomness. And then my life got better, right? No. Then my dad became an alcoholic. And that sucked. And it turns out that he suffered from clinical depression. So that sucked. After getting kicked out of school and coming back, after giving up alcohol, things worked out, right? No. Then there was a string of weird, violent incidences in my school related to the same bullies, although not involving me, thank God. But there was a stabbing, there was a prep versus goth fight that then turned into a prep versus cholo fight, which then turned into a prep versus gangster fight. And basically everyone got kicked out of school. Most of them dropped out of the football team, so we didn't even have a varsity football team. And that was the end of it, right? Things got better. No. From there, I tried to start my own company. That went well for about 3 years until it didn't go well. I then went to college and I was on a fast track to be a professor. I went and to a school and I started doing tutoring and that kind of stuff. And then I had a cancer scare, and the cancer scare derailed my life. Okay, so things got better then, right? That's when God stepped in, right? For 15 years after that, I was a Taoist. So I left religion when I was 13, and 25 when I went through the cancer scare. I dropped out of college, right? Like literally one class, 5 hours before graduation, I dropped out. So I have an incomplete to this day. That is now making it hard for me to return to school because apparently that incomplete is a real problem. And then for 15 years, I was a Taoist. So what about God, right? Then I read the Bible. Well, I tried reading the Bible when I was 15. Couldn't do it. Found it too unbelievable. Read it again when I was like 27 for the first time. It went all the way through. Like read it again as in read it all the way through. Okay, that was good. Did I become a Christian then? No. Okay, so what about a year later when I read it again? Which, why wouldn't I? No, because then I started jumping around through different translations trying to find one that made better sense. And then after the third time I went through the Bible, I was having trouble with Paul. So I started talking to preachers and stuff online while I was doing a very different thing online. I was doing martial arts. And maybe that's where I was like, okay, there's God, right? Through all of that, I ended up going back. I ended up back at my childhood church, the same one I left, after going through different churches. Like I went all around. Was it through one of the churches that I found and saw God? No. So I started attending church. I went to RCIA, or whatever it is for adults, and I became a Catholic. Was it there? Then I meet my wife. I leave my career of a martial arts instructor, and I go into car sales for 7 years. My dad, a year and a half in, has Alzheimer's, or develops Alzheimer's, and I end up having to take care of my dad full time. And eventually, my wife leaves me because of the situation with my dad. We spent about a year apart. I quit my job. I quit a corporate job to spend more time with my dad because it was getting too expensive for the care that he was getting. And then I spent the last year completely broke, only earning about $1,000 a month while my wife is in China. So is it then that I finally see and understand God? Well, in that time, I read the church fathers and I read the Bible multiple times. Did any of that get me to faith? No, because I believed in God the entire time. Well, this is a video about why I believe God is true. Why do we go through all this story? Because this story is why. Because this story is why I believe God is true. See, it isn't just one event. It isn't one tragedy. It isn't one miracle. I lost my ability to walk, and I gained it back with a lot of hard effort. I went through a cancer scare, and I survived it. I lost all my money, and I survived it. I survived, and I survived, and I survived. No, is it the survival then that made you believe in God? No, there are times that I was destroyed. There are times that I truly lost. Okay, so was it the tragedy that made you believe in God? No. There are plenty of people that I know who tragedy is the exact reason, even a small tragedy like their grandmother dying, is the reason why they lost their faith. Oh, how could a good person get cancer and die? No, my mom died. That didn't affect my faith one way or the other. So what does it mean to believe in God? Does it mean that I believe in a sky daddy? No. A spaghetti monster? Not at all. What does a Christian believe God is? Well, he's the creator and destroyer of the universe. He's the beginning and the end. See, if a Christian has a fictionalized vision of God where God is always going to give you what you want, he's a genie, and he's always nice, and he's always friendly, and he's never disapproving, and he's always accepting. That's not God. God has standards. God created the laws of the universe. He has rules. So that's not what God is. God is not some kind grandfather in the sky. Okay, so then what about the other God? What about the demiurge? Well, that's not a real God. That's a false God. So is God the one that Dan McKellen and Kip Davis and Joshua Bowen saying that's the God of the Bible? No, that is not God, and that's not why I believe in God. It isn't vengeance that got me to believe in God. It isn't me beating up my bullies that got me to believe in God. It isn't my mom dying. Like I said, I always believed in God. So God chooses who believes in him. The Holy Spirit calls to believers. You can't get there on your own. It's a gift of grace, and either you have it or you don't. So I can learn all the biblical scholarly facts in the world. That's not going to change my faith in God. I can learn all the history in the world. That's not going to change my faith in God. I can learn about wars and violence and all that stuff. Still believe in God. I can learn about cures and miracles and medicine and all the good things. I believe in God because God chose me to believe. And I know God is real because when I speak to God, He answers. Sometimes a yes, sometimes a no. When I pray, my prayers are effective. They always have been. There's never a time that I prayed that my prayer wasn't answered. Now, you might say your experience differs. Fine. I can't speak for your experience. You might say my experience is anecdotal. Well, I got news for you and a news flash. All experience is anecdotal. But when I pray, God listens and God answers. And when I suffer, I pray. And when good things happen, like I meet my wife, or I get a job, or I get money that was unexpected, I'm thankful to God. I thank God for granting me the ability to receive. I thank God for creating the universe. I thank God for granting me what I prayed for. Do I give credit to God? Yes, I give all credit to God because God created everything. Both the good and the bad exist because God allows it. So when I say I believe in God, I'm talking about the creator of the universe and the destroyer of the universe. The one true God, the Holy Trinity, the three in one God. There is no other. When I am grateful to God, is it because I'm giving Him false credit or false blame? No. I'm praying to God because God is real. Well, what proof do you have? What physical, substantial proof? If I had physical, substantial proof, it wouldn't be God. That would be a created thing. I'm not talking about a sky daddy. I'm not talking about a best friend. I'm not talking about a wife or a husband, although all those metaphors have been used for God. I'm not talking about a great mother. I'm talking about the Creator. And I'm talking about someone who, when I pray, answers me. When I pray for something in my life, God has always answered me, and all credit to God for that. And when God has told me no, He's told me no in some aggressive ways. I am not perfect. I am a sinner. I am wicked. I mess up all the time. And I don't mean this just morally or ethically. I mean, I make mistakes, man. And I get things wrong. But God's God. God's true whether I believe in God or not. God exists outside of whether I understand Him or not. So I believe in God. And I know God to be real. And I know God to be true. Why? Because God believed in me first. God predestined me to believe. There is no logic, no reason, no mathematical equation that can prove my faith. I simply believe. I believed in God when I was a child and watching my mother and family die. I believed in God when I was a teenager and an alcoholic. I believed in God when I lost everything. I believed in God when I got everything back. I believed in God when I lost my job. I believed in God when I went back to church for the first time. I believed in God when I talked to Stephen Glosson about religion. And I believed in God when my wife and I met. And I believe in God now that me and my wife are divorcing. There's no one thing that proved God to me. And there's no one thing that disproved God for me. I've always believed in God since I was born. Since my first thoughts, which my first thoughts were looking over a cliff, looking down. That's my first memory, is me looking down while me and my dad are driving. Me and my dad are driving. I'm driving? No. Well, I'm in the back seat and we're going up a mountain, I think in Colorado or something like that. That's my first memory, is looking down a cliff and being like, whoa, I believed in God then. And guess what? I believe in God now. And it's not because of the Liturgy of the Hours, even though that's helped me understand my faith and given me a practice that I don't always do, but I should. It's not because of the church that I belong to, which is the Catholic Church. No priest, no bishop, no one made me believe in God. It isn't my father who was an alcoholic and believed in, Hal Lindsey's version of the apocalypse. None of that. None of that. I thought it was fun. I thought it was interesting. Didn't care. I was more interested in the Nephilim and like giants and all that kind of stuff. And then when I found out, ghosts and monsters weren't real, I was like, well, what do I do with the Bible, right? Well, it turns out the Bible's not about that. It's about people. Okay. I found out about relationships. Oh, I can see all the different aspects of my friends and relationships in my life. But that's not what convinced me. It isn't the Bible that made me believe God is true. I believed in God long before I read the Bible. I believed in God when I wasn't going to church. Why I believe God is true is because God granted me the gift of faith. Thank you and good night.